Hi, I'm Janelle, and I've recorded 2 videos to show you how to sew my pattern, the Glacier Crossbody Bag. The Glacier is the main pattern in the pattern bundle, which also includes the 2 bags for the Glacier base bag patterns. Use these videos as a guide to work through the steps in the paper pattern. You can read more about the Glacier in our sewing pattern section on our website at emmalinebags.com. All right, let's start sewing our bags. Let's start by going through a little bit of the pattern instructions. On the first page, a really important note is that the seam allowances are 1/4 inch, unless otherwise specified. So if you have any questions about what seam allowance you're using, it will always say in the directions if it's different than 1/4 inch. Then I just go through a bit of what pieces go where so you can help with your fabric selections. And you'll notice there's 2 cutting lists. There's a list and a chart, and you can use either one, not both. This one has a little bit more details as far as trimming things in red. For instance, when we're working on our border pieces, we do need to trim the interfacing 1/4 inch. So you can maybe have a read through that first to see if there's any special notes, and then jump right into your cutting list. On the cutting list, I show you which interfacings go with which fabric pieces, so you know which ones to fuse them on. For instance, this one gets fused onto the shoulder strap and here to here. Now there's a few that you cut that don't have a piece to refer to, and that's because they are a separate pattern piece that's not exactly the same as the exterior cut one or the lining cut one. So for those, just refer to the corresponding name. For instance, large side gusset interfacing goes with large side gusset, and zipper gusset interfacing goes with zippered gusset. And then you'll see some fleece. The fleece gets fused on after the interfacing, over top of the interfacing. And I've got a stack here and I'll show you what that looks like. And you can cut your foam stabilizer 14 by 14 and just put that to the side. So here's a little bit of instruction on how to fuse and which ones to fuse it to. I've just gone through that, so you can have a read there though. And then we're going to attach our foam stabilizer to our gusset pieces, and we're going to do that right after this. In that little video clip, I do mention the mini, and that is part of this Glacier Bag Bundle, but is not in this instruction. So if you want to make the mini or large Glacier base bags, those will be in separate videos. So next we'll transfer our markings. So what we're going to do is transfer pen markings from the pattern pieces onto the fabric pieces. On the small side gusset and the large side gusset, I'd like you to mark these on the right side, like so. And what I do is actually cut little tiny triangles about 1/8 inch long so that they don't get into the seam allowance and they won't be seen later. And then I can just mark them really quickly like that, and I just go through the stack. And then on the border pieces, which are these 2 here, on the wrong side, we'll mark the 4 center sections, top, bottom, and the sides. And it's a really good idea to actually take an extra step here and mark not only the outside edges, but also the inside. So we want to make sure that we mark this very accurately. These are going to help us position our pieces later. And then we've also got to do the same thing on all of your lining pieces. We've got 3 lining pieces for the front vertical pocket, and we've got 2 for the back vertical pocket. And we'll mark all of those. Actually, the wrong side is fine, otherwise we won't be able to see them. Okay. And then with the back piece, this is for my back outer pocket. I want to show you, this is where our fusible fleece is interfaced over top of the lining. And this just gives a little extra padding, a little extra softness to the exterior of our bag. It's not completely necessary, but I really like the result. All right, so back to our instructions. We're going to attach metal bag labels. So if you're attaching a metal bag label or something else like a fabric or cork one, now would be the time to decide where you're going to have it on your bag. I'm going to put mine on the back of the bag, the back outer pocket. And this is actually a cork label by bypira.com, and they sew on really easy, and you can get them in all different colors. So I'm going to put that on first, and then we are going to attach our large side gussets onto our foam pieces. Get your pattern piece that's interfaced and smooth it out and make it quite tight but not stretched to the surface. This is a great way to use up some scraps of foam, isn't it? Because I have small sizes all over the place and I don't have anything to use them for. So this is just so it doesn't slide. The interfacing is nice because it helps it from puckering. So pin all the way around, and then we're going to use a basting stitch to sew these into place. And I want to stay just slightly in my seam allowance. My seam allowance is 1/4 inch. So 1/4 inch is really right about there, and I just line the edge up of my presser foot along here and have my needle at 1/4 inch, and then I just move it over a couple marks. So just move it over about 1/16 of an inch, just so that I know that I'm inside. And when you're sewing along here, you really want to be accurate and not travel into here. It's okay if you go into this way, but that's why I find it easiest to just have the edge of my presser foot on that fabric edge and set it at 1/4 inch, and then just move it in a bit. And then you trim off that foam, just even with the fabric edges. I don't want you to trim it back farther, because when we do the next step, which is doing a zigzag stitch, if you have trimmed that back, your zigzag stitch will actually curl your fabric under, and then your seam allowance will be too small. So actually you can see it better on this one because I've used pink thread. I've got my basting stitch, and then I used a width of 3 and zigzagged the whole side of that, and you can see what that does. It compresses it so it's really thin and packed down. If you stitch it first and then cut it off, cut the foam off, you'll probably cut some of those stitches and it'll pop open a bit and be a bit thicker like that. So let's make a pleat board for our credit card slot pockets. This is made out of a file folder, and in the instructions I show you how to make one of these, and it's great because you can use it over and over again, and it makes folding so simple. So I have you mark lines at 4 1/4 and 8 1/4 and 12 1/4 from the edge. Well, I'd need a bigger ruler to do that, or 4 inches over from the next line. Be very accurate, make these as straight as possible, and then you can go after and score these with an awl or something that's sharp but not going to cut. And on the back, do the same thing using the other measurements that are provided. So what this does is, if you fold on the score lines, it makes a copy of what our credit cards are going to look like. And on the front part, we always mark top right side so that we know where to line up our fabric. We're going to line up our fabric strip that we've cut on this end, which is the top, and the right side of the fabric, which is up. So we'll just clip it in place, and then what we'll do is use a flat metal ruler or something that is going to be able to press into these corners. I've got one of my son's old ID cards, and press into that fold and fold over the next layer, pressing again into that fold and fold over the next mark, and again doing the same thing so that we're deep into those curves and not uneven. So then we'll take a dry iron and press those, and then it'll pop open. You can take that out, and refold. So we'll make sure it's folded nice and straight, and now we can give it a steam. And then I also like to do it again from the back. Okay, so now we can take this to the sewing machine and top stitch these 3 folds. After I top stitch these folds, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to just baste these 2 sides down, okay? So what I'll do is pin these in place so they don't wiggle. And then we're going to use a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance down either side. And what I like to do is actually start with my presser foot here and then back up across those folds and then go all the way, because if you start here, you end up stretching out your folds. Not that much, but it will stretch out your folds just a little bit. It always does. And then on this side, when I'm sewing, I do the same thing. Take this to your sewing machine, do your top stitching, and then we'll come back and we'll be ready for the next step. Okay, we're back from sewing, and I've top stitched along each top of the card slots and basted along the sides with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So what's next in the instructions is to make sure that this is the right size. So just double check that this is 4.5 inches wide, and if it's not, you can take your rotary cutter and just trim off the end. Mine is okay, so I don't have to do any trimming. And then what we're going to do is put on our card slot left side piece and our lipstick pocket piece. And what we'll do is just clip them to the sides or pin. And then we're going to sew these using our regular seam allowance, which is 1/4 of an inch. Okay, just going to press those. And I will do a top stitch down either side of these as well, just along here. Okay, we're back from top stitching, and now we just need to place our back piece right over top so that they're right sides together, and we're going to pin around all 4 sides. We are going to leave a gap for turning right here on one end. It doesn't need to be too big, just big enough to get your pocket through. And we'll stitch around the outside of this using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And then after you've done that, you can clip off your corners at a 45-degree angle. Okay, we're back from sewing, and now we are going to press all around all 4 edges and press that seam allowance in as well. Use some steam, roll out the seams so they're nice and straight, and let's get this even. Push the back in a bit. Give that a press. And now what we'll do is we'll top stitch just along this top edge to give it a final finish, and then we'll be ready to attach it to the pocket piece. Alright, we're back from doing our top stitching, and now we're ready to attach this to our pocket piece. So what we'll do is grab a nice gridded ruler, and we'll line up the mark at 3 1/4 inches across the straight edge of the bottom of this pocket piece. Okay, and now our left side edge needs to be 2 1/2 inches in from the side. So we'll measure, push our ruler over, keeping the bottom straight, and we'll find the mark where it's 2 1/2 inches from the edge. So we've got 1, 2 1/2, and that's our corner mark right there. So put that across the bottom, and then we'll just pin this in place. And we're also going to stitch in the ditch here, and in the ditch means just in the middle of the seam on this side. So we'll just put a couple pins in here so that this doesn't slide before we get to stitch it down. That stitching's done, and now we're going to make the lipstick slot. First I want to show you a neat thing I do to bring my thread to the back. Instead of trimming at the front and leaving little tails, I grab my bobbin thread and pull the top thread to the back. It pulls up a loop. Now with a pin or something like a seam ripper, I grab that little loop and bring it to the back, and then I tie this off. And then now I don't trim and have little strings or threads at the front. So we're going to bring this in to the same measurement as the other side, which is 2.5. So I'll pull this over until I get to a half mark, the 1/2 inch mark here, and I'm at 3 1/4 on the bottom, and I'll just pull this in to 2.5 inches, 1, 2.5, and pin this as straight as I possibly can. Okay, so in the instructions I have you sew this down and then stop and then sew across here, but why not just sew it all at once? We'll pull these pins out a little bit, actually pull them up and then poke them back down again so that they're out of the way. Okay, and then fold this to the middle and get a nice crease right in half, and then these edges here must meet, and then we'll flatten this out. So there we go. We got that flattened out. Have a look. Pin this in place. Do that one again. All right, so now we're going to sew this down. We're going to go down the side, turn, and across the bottom, and this pocket's done. All right, there's our finished credit cards and lipstick pocket. And if lipstick's not your thing, maybe some lip balm. And we're ready to go right into our bag straps and then the strap anchors. We'll start with our strap, and we just need to connect our 2 pieces of strap so that it's long enough for crossbody. So you put one down on your work surface right side up, and the other one at a right angle to that. You can use your lines here as a guide if you like. And the most important thing to do here is to make sure you overlap at least 1/4 inch on the sides so that you have a seam allowance. And then we're going to draw a line from this inside angle of this intersection and to this one here. So I probably should have done that before I put the pin down, but that's okay. I'll just hold it over top. All right, so I've got a sewing line there. It's kind of crooked, but I'll know which one to sew on. And we'll sew across there, and then when you're done, here's one that's already done. You can trim off, here I've already done it, trim off those fabrics like that, and you've got one long strap without a big join in the middle that's going to be really bulky. So we'll press that open, and after we press it open, go ahead and attach your interfacing to the back side of the strap. You can cut off that selvage as well, and then we'll come back and we'll make some bag straps. All right, we're back from pressing. I pressed my interfacing on, then I pressed over 1/4 inch on each end of the strap. Then I folded the whole strap in half lengthwise and gave it a good press. So then we're going to open that out again and then fold these to the middle and press, and then turn the strap around and do the same thing. And then that's going to end up looking like this. And then we'll fold the whole thing in half one more time, and that's our strap. So all we have to do now is top stitch around the outside edges, and that strap is ready. Okay, if you're using cork material to make your straps, you can cut them to 3 inches as well. It's just the same. And then use a long gridded ruler like this, but probably your long one. and put it at 1.5 inches from the edge and use a chalk pencil, make a line, and then we'll fold one of the outer edges to meet the center and clip it along the length the whole way. Okay, if you don't have a lot of clips, you can just do half the length and then do the next step. Okay, so then we take the outer step, or the outer edge, and fold it to the middle and make sure it's nice and even and smooth. Then I'm going to top stitch around this edge of this strap, just like I do with a fabric strap. I use a long stitch length, probably 3.5. I like to use a Microtex needle because the Microtex really pierces it really nicely, but with a small hole so it doesn't create any cracks. You can leave the edge raw. We're going to be stitching around it so it will look good. But if you want, you can use our Emmaline strap ends, which that's what I'm going to do when I'm done. But I won't put that on till later in the project. So for right now, we're just going to stitch around the outside edge and make a strap. All right, so our strap is done. It's all top stitched, looks really, really good. We're just going to put our slider on and thread it through the center bar. And now you can sew a box right here or close it with a rivet. If you're sewing a box, you need to leave a little bit more length. I like to go about 1.5 inches from here to here so that you have room for your presser foot to actually do a square and not hit this bar. If it's really close, you're not going to be able to make that turn because the back side of your foot will hit there. But I like to use rivets. I find it easier, so I'm just going to use some clips, clip it together, and take it over to my little rivet station and put one in there just like I did with this one. Okay, so straps are done. This is my cork strap that I made. I'm not putting a slider on it because I cut it a little bit shorter. I'm happy with the length. I don't think I'll be able to adjust it anyway. The ends are just stitched across and raw edge, and those will be flipped to the back on my strap anyway, so you won't be able to see them. All right, so now we're moving to our strap anchors, and I've had you do a 4-fold strap just like the main shoulder strap was made, but interfacing only on one side just to make it a little easier to sew through when it's being attached to the side gusset. So go ahead and make that and then cut that in half after you've done all your pressing. And when you get, what you'll get is this. You'll get one with finished ends and ones with raw edges, and those raw edges are going to be hidden when we sew them on. So go ahead then and do some top stitching around all 4 sides. And then, you know, they are a bit long, so if you wanted them a little bit shorter, take off a 1/2 inch or so. I made them a little bit longer just for something different because, you know, I just wanted to try something different and add a new feature, so they're a bit longer. But if you would rather have them, say, about that long, then, you know, take off a 1/2 inch or so. And what to do if you're using cork or something thicker. If you're using cork or a thicker material, using this method with the 4-fold is going to get too thick to sew to the gusset. So what I recommend is you actually cut your strap tabs half width. So the main strap anchor was 3 inches wide, and I cut this one at 1.5 inches wide. Then I used my ruler at 3/4 of an inch and my chalk, and what I'm going to do is just fold to the center line, and I like to have the back of the clip up here so that when I'm stitching this down it's a lot flatter to the sewing machine. So I'll go across here. You could use tape to stick this down. It doesn't stick really great to the sewing machine, or sorry, it doesn't stick at all to the sewing machine. It doesn't stick really great to the cork, and you know, tape's expensive. You want to use it only when you need to. So take that to the sewing machine then and do your top stitching along that side only, and then come back and do the same thing to this side, and then you'll have a completed strap anchor. I can have both edges raw on this one because when I do add it to my side gusset, I'm going to be putting on the strap end first, or so that those raw edges will be hidden. So actually when I do my top stitching, you can even sew across here or do your little back and forth enforcement just within there so that it's not going to be seen because it's going to be covered up by the strap end. All right, so let's get those finished up and then we'll show you how to get them onto the side gussets. All right, let's put our strap anchors on. Now you've cut your strap anchors in half. There's a raw edge on one and a folded edge on the other, and we're going to take a ruler and mark a 1/2 inch in from the folded edge on the back, and then we're going to thread the ring on, and we're going to tape this down in place so the edge lines up right there. Now if you've got wash away Wonder Tape, you can use that. It's not as sticky, but if you do a couple pieces it'll work fine. I'm going to use our leather tape from Prim that we sell, and I love this because it's super sticky and actually so sticky that you don't want to sew through it, and it does gum up your scissors. But if I just put a little piece in there, I won't be sewing over it because I'm going to sew around here and it won't gum up my sewing machine. I don't like to sew over that stuff at all. Okay, so we've got a strap anchor. Looks good. We'll have a look from the front and make sure that these corners are tucked in. And now we're going to attach it right to the top of our gusset piece. We want this folded edge to be 1 inch down from the top. So we'll line up the 1 inch along the edge of there. And I'll center this between here and here so I can center this guy. All right, so it needs some tape. Don't put this tape too high because I'll show you why in a sec. If you put the tape too high and you put it on here and this folds down, you'll be able to see it after it's constructed. So keep it just low enough that it provides enough stick to keep it from sliding. And we'll turn it around just to make sure it's nice and straight. I want to move it over just a bit right there. There, I'm happy with that. Okay, and now I want to draw a little chalk line. You can already see one for where I'm going to sew my box. Okay, and I've measured 1.5 inches up from this stitching line to up here. So that is right along here. I'm going to go ahead and stitch this down with my top stitching length and anchor that in place just like I did with this one. Now you could stop there, be totally fine, but if you want to, you could go ahead and put a couple rivets in here just to add some interest. I love rivets. And that's how you do the fabric ones. So as you know, I'm making a bag with cork as well, so I have a cork gusset and a cork strap anchor, and I'm going to attach it this way using one of the strap ends. It's actually really easy. You put your ring on, and again we'll use oops. Okay, don't do that. I'm gonna see if I can salvage some of this. Yes. Stuck to me. Okay. Put it down here. Okay. We're not sewing on this one at all, so we don't have to worry about it being on the edges. This is just to stick it together. Oh, look now. I've forgotten my ring. That's not the first time I've done that. Today, actually. I did it with that one too. Okay. All right, we've got this together and we're going to attach this guy on here like this. We want it to be nice and secure, so I like to put a little bit of glue in here. I don't squirt it in there because you get too many. You really only need a tiny bit. I put it on a little piece of plastic or something and use a toothpick and put it in there. But I'm not going to do that today because I'm pretty messy and I don't want to muck up my board and everything while you guys are watching, because it'll be something that you'll be bugging me about later. So get that on there so it's nice and straight. Look at it from the front, make sure you're happy with it. And this is called an awl. We use this to make pilot holes so that it gives our some screws a place to start. And the strap ends come with little mini screws to tack them in place, and you need a very tiny mini screwdriver, a little bit smaller than the normal average mini screwdriver we use for a lot of our other hardware. These are fine screws. Be very gentle and put them in straight as possible, and you'll find with those pilot holes that go in beautifully. Okay, so what do we need? We need a bit of tape on the back of here so we can get it in the right place again, just like so. And we're going to line this up the exact same way with our 1-inch mark on the edge. Oops, throwing things. Center it. And then we'll center this right on the middle of our strap. Okay, let's have a look. That looks a bit offside. Okay, it's because I usually do it this way, but I might not have had this thing centered really nicely, where my edge is crooked when I cut it. Okay, there we go. I'm happy with that. So now to attach this, it's going to be pretty thick to sew through. You can if you have an industrial, but I just put in some rivets. I think it looks amazing. I just want to show you, I also use the same method with fabric ends. I didn't have cork, and I put those on for my other bag. All right, that's the strap anchors. I have a zipper tutorial, a video tutorial on my channel if you want to see how to get the sliders on if you're using zippers by the yard. And you just need to make sure, even if you're not using zippers by the yard, if you're using pre-cut zippers, that you cut the zippers exactly to the lengths in the pattern, and then stitch the ends closed so that they don't come open. On the 12.5 and 15-inch zippers, I want you to mark center so that we'll have that marking later. So just line them up on the ruler and mark 7.5 inches for the 15 and at 6 1/4 for the 12.5, and then we'll get started putting these zippers together. Okay, let's get our 9-inch zippers ready. These are for the vertical pocket in the front of the crossbody bag or the mini of the Glacier base bag. With your lining, zipper end right side up, put the zipper over top, lining up the edges, and then put your exterior fabric wrong side up and pin it together, and then do the same thing for the other side. You can use clips here, I like pins. And then stitch this together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which looks like this. And then fold the fabric back and finger press this down away from the zipper. And then I'll show you on this end, I've already done the top stitching. So just do a nice top stitching across the zipper. And these zippers are ready for the vertical pockets. Okay, let's make our zipper gusset. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're doing the mini or the large on the Glacier base bag, or whether you're doing the crossbody version. This is for the main compartment zipper, the zipper that goes across the top center section. We will have our lining right side up, And then over top of that, we'll line up the top edge of the zipper along the lining. I like to use wash away wonder tape to do that. And the reason why I like that is because then your zipper doesn't stretch, or your fabric doesn't stretch and pucker while you're sewing. It doesn't gum up your needle, so it's beautiful to work with. Okay, so then we'll put our exterior fabric, the outer fabric, wrong side up over that. And you can tape that down or pin or clip this together all along here. And then we'll pretend that's all clipped together. Stitch along here and with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just a 1/4 inch on your zipper foot. You'll probably need to slide this zipper out of the way as you go. And then when you reach it again, lift up your foot, move it behind, and then continue sewing down. After you've got that stitched down, you need to fold it back and press. And what I mean by that is, here's the stitched piece. We'll fold them back, we'll fold that back and we'll press it down on the front and on the back. It's really important to make sure that you've finger pressed this well and gotten it pulled away right away from the seam so that you don't have it slightly over, because what happens then is, this is a pretty skinny piece of fabric. If you have it over even just a hair, your edges are not going to line up. So we need to make sure that these are pressed out completely. So then go ahead and attach your other lining and exterior pieces to the other side of the zipper the same way, which will mean for this one, lining right side up, and on this side of the zipper, the pull will be on the right, and then your exterior fabric over that. When you're all done and you've pressed them both, you can then go ahead and top stitch along the sides of the zipper. In the instructions, I have you sew one side on, fold it over, press, and top stitch, and then sew the other side on, fold it over, press, and top stitch. But if you want to wait till the end, you can certainly just top stitch it all at the same time, because then you've got your stitch length set, and you can just actually do a box. You can come down here, cross over, and go back again. I did that on the cork one here, and it's all pressed and ready to go. My edges all meet nicely, and we're ready to attach this now to our gusset pieces. Now we're going to connect our zipper gusset pieces to our side gussets. If you didn't mark your placement markings, remember to do so now. It's important because it'll be hard to do later. Also, maybe check and make sure that your pieces are all the right size, because even a 1/8 of an inch or a 1/16 of an inch out here, if they're a bit too big, is going to add double that, basically, if you have 2 of them, to the size of your gusset. So an 1/8 of an inch, a little bit too long, is going to create a 1/4 of an inch in excess when we attach these later. So what we need to do is get our, I've already done it actually. This is what I'm trying to show you. We need to get your side gusset pieces, your large ones, and put 2 of them right side together. These are my lining ones. It doesn't matter, we do it for both the lining and the exterior. I'll just show you the lining ones first. So pin or clip it together along here, stitch with your 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and then go ahead and take it to the ironing board and press it open. Okay, and after you've done that, you can do a little bit of top stitching. I hope you can see this. Pink on pink, not so good, but I've top stitched on either side of the seam. Okay, and that helps anchor those seam allowances down and make them nice and flat. And now we're ready to assemble this with our zipper. So put the lining one down first, right side up, and then place your zipper gusset on here. It doesn't matter whether it's this end or this end, they're both going to get done. So let's see, line that up evenly, and then the outside, the exterior with the foam, is going to go down on top of that, and pull that back and line up those edges, and clip this in place. Okay. I'll just put one extra. I know, I'm a bit of a cheater actually. Sometimes I don't even clip them, I just take them and sew them, but I'm trying to teach you the right way. And then turn it around to the other side. Get the other end of the zipper gusset, the lining one, and attach it the same way. We'll take this to the sewing machine and sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance again. And so far I haven't actually shown you any sewing that I've been doing. I am sewing, trust me. I've had a few fun things happen. I hit the stop start button by accident and luckily it was in reverse. And I also just broke a needle because I forgot to move my needle over and hit a zipper foot. Too bad the camera wasn't on for that. I will be sewing in front of the camera later, so maybe you can see some of the really silly things that I get up to. Okay, so stitch those together, all right? And when you're done, it will look like this. This one is stitched together. We're going to turn this right side out and make a loop. And this is our gusset, okay? So now what we want to do is connect these two together so they operate as one piece. So first, do a little bit of top stitching across this zipper end. And what that does is anchors these in place and makes, it traps the zipper in there as well, which is also creating a little bit more stability or strength in the end of the zipper. So stitch across here 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch, whatever your seam allowance is for your top stitching that you've been using. So try to match this one and stitch across here. And then after you've done that, we're going to baste all of this together. So these are your center bottom seams. You can match those together. And then along here, flatten it out and clip. So do that all the way around both sides. And then you'll do a basting stitch all the way around each side. Just stay at 1/8 inch or just inside this seam allowance somewhere. Don't veer out, but just anywhere in here, and stitch it all together with a long stitch length. I've got my cork one done. It's all ready. All right, so go and put those together, and then our zipper gussets for the large compartments are done, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, next step, make our small gussets. This is done exactly the same way, except our zipper pieces don't have fabric on the sides. So we're going to have our lining pieces right side up, then we're going to have our zipper right side up, and then our exterior outer fabrics wrong side up. And then we'll pin those ends together and stitch across them again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Flip it around and do the exact same thing to the other end. And then after these are stitched, we'll go ahead and do that top stitching that we did in here. I'll show you that on the one that I've done, the top stitching that's just across here. And then I've gone ahead and did all of the basting stitches to hold these together. So it's basted with a 1/4 inch or smaller than a 1/4 inch actually, or an 1/8. And then together we will have 2 small gusset pieces, one for our outer zipper pocket, one for our front zipper pocket, the vertical pocket one, and one for the main compartment. We are now going to attach our vertical zipper. This is the 9-inch zipper onto the panels that will make the vertical pocket. Okay, so this is the lining and it's right side up. And I'm going to put the zipper on here right side up with the pull on the left. For this, I like to use washable Wonder Tape, and it's not very sticky. It doesn't gum up your needle. It can dry out though, so what I'd like to do is I like to store it in a little Ziploc bag so that it doesn't dry out on me, because if you don't use it very often, you could come back to it and it'll be dry. So this piece is a little bit longer than the pocket piece, so what you need to do here is just to center it as best as you can. There, center it and match the edges. Press it down. We'll be trimming that off later. And then another row of tape. Certainly you can just pin or clip, but I like this because my fabric doesn't slide and I don't get any stretching on my zipper. It's easier to just tear it off than cut it. Then you can peel it back. And this is my exterior, the outer fabric with the fleece on it, and I'm going to match that up on here. Let's pull our zipper to the end so it's a bit easier. Since we're going to start sewing at this end, we're going to want the zipper down here anyway. It's easier to sew with the zipper out of the way. And then we'll attach that on there. And I still like to put a few clips on just so it doesn't slide. I don't know, maybe it's overkill, but I do. Then I'm going to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance just down here. So I use my zipper foot. Some of you have machines that have a really wide foot that'll go right over the zipper. I don't, so I use a zipper foot with my needle on this side, and I have my zipper foot edge just along here and use the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So after I've stitched that, I have one here that's already done, stitched along here. We'll flip the outer fabric back and the lining back, and you can take this to your ironing board if you like now and press these back, or you can do it after too, after you've sewn the other side on. It's up to you. But what I'm going to do is do it after, just so I can show you how to get the other side on. So then the other side is the same way. Lining is right side up, zipper is right side up, centered. Of course you want to make sure that it matches the other section that you did. And I'll do this again after I turn off the video and then use the tape. You don't need to see me tape again, it's probably boring. And then exterior right side up. Then stitch that down, and we'll fold these out and top stitch along here. When I top stitch along here, I use a longer stitch length, make it nice and pretty, about a 3.5, and just go, I like to say 1/8 of an inch away, but sometimes it looks better even if it's just a hair more than that. It gives a really nice look. Okay, so we'll see you when you're done. Okay, so now I've done my top stitching on either side of the zipper, and I'm ready for my next step, which is to place this on a lining panel so that when you open the zipper, you see pretty fabric. Oh, I like that placement. That's kind of fun. Okay, so this is really easy. Just ignore these little extra bits. We'll trim those off later. Line this up on all edges, okay? And then clip all around the sides, and we're going to baste around the edges. I've done all my basting stitches around the outside edge and trimmed off the ends of these zippers, and now this front vertical pocket is ready to be assembled. So that's it for part 1. In part 2, we are going to put all of this together. We're going to assemble the front vertical pocket, a small gusset, and a border piece to make the front of the bag, and a back outer pocket, the other small gusset piece, and a border piece to make the back of the bag, and then we've got the large side gussets. That'll hold it all together. So we'll put this all together in part 2. We'll see you there.